The quantum fusion reactor hummed with the kind of low-frequency vibration that most people learn to ignore after a few weeks aboard Titan's Edge, but Marcus Thompson had never stopped listening to its subtle variations. As he guided his cleaning cart through the reactor control center during the night shift, his trained ear caught irregularities in the containment field harmonics that made him pause beside a bank of monitoring displays. "Hey, Professor," called out Technician Rodriguez from across the control room, using the mocking nickname that had followed Marcus for 3 years. "Make sure you don't accidentally shut down the reactor while you're dusting those consoles. We'd hate to lose power because our janitor got confused by all the pretty blinking lights." Marcus smiled and continued his work, though inwardly he winced at Rodriguez's casual dismissal. "Don't worry," he replied with practiced self-deprecation, "I'll try to resist the urge to press any buttons marked, Destroy Station. Though I have to admit, some of these controls are pretty tempting." The other technicians laughed, and Marcus joined in good-naturedly while privately noting that the quantum containment readings were fluctuating in patterns that suggested microfractures in the primary containment field. It was the kind of subtle indication that required years of nuclear engineering experience to recognize, experience that his colleagues assumed he didn't possess. "Marcus, you missed a spot over here," added Engineer Chen, pointing to a perfectly clean section of flooring near the main control station. "And while you're at it, could you explain these containment readings to me? I'm having trouble understanding all these big numbers." "I'm sure you'll figure it out," Marcus said diplomatically, though he could see that Chen was misinterpreting the display data. "After all, you're the one with the fancy engineering degree." "That's right," Chen agreed with obvious satisfaction. "Some of us went to school for this stuff instead of learning about reactors from cleaning around them." Marcus nodded and moved on, though he wondered what Chen would say if he knew that Marcus had actually written some of the theoretical papers that formed the basis for this station's reactor design. But those days felt like another lifetime, before personal tragedy had derailed his career and left him fighting just to keep himself and his daughter afloat. "Daddy?" 8-year-old Kira's voice came through his personal communicator, tinged with the drowsiness of someone who should have been asleep hours ago. "When are you coming home?" "Soon, sweetheart," Marcus replied quietly, moving away from the technicians to take the call privately. "Did you finish your homework?" "Yes, but I couldn't sleep. The mining equipment is really loud tonight." Kira's quarters were in the station's lower levels, where the ambient noise from industrial operations made peaceful rest difficult. "And I had that dream again." Marcus felt his heart tighten. Kira still had nightmares about the transport accident that had killed her mother 2 years ago, dreams that left her confused and frightened in the middle of the night shift when Marcus wasn't there to comfort her. "I'll be home in about 2 hours, he promised. "Try to get some sleep, and remember what we practiced about the breathing exercises." "Okay, Daddy. I love you." "I love you too, little star." Marcus ended the call and returned to his cleaning, trying to balance his concern for Kira with his growing unease about the reactor readings. The containment fluctuations were subtle but persistent, following a pattern that suggested the early stages of field destabilization. In his former life as a senior reactor engineer, he would have initiated immediate diagnostic protocols and possibly recommended a controlled shutdown for safety inspection. "Thompson." Chief Engineer Vega's voice cut through the control room's ambient noise like a plasma cutter through steel. "Are you planning to clean those floors sometime tonight, or are you too busy eavesdropping on technical discussions you don't understand?" "Sorry, Chief," Marcus replied, immediately moving toward the area Vega indicated. "Just trying to work around everyone's equipment." "Work faster and listen less," Vega said curtly. "We don't need maintenance staff getting confused by engineering conversations and spreading rumors about problems that don't exist." Marcus bit back his instinctive response, which would have been to point out that the problems very much did exist and were getting worse by the hour. Instead, he focused on his cleaning while surreptitiously monitoring the reactor displays. The quantum containment field was showing stress patterns that reminded him of a case study he'd analyzed during his doctoral research, a theoretical scenario that had led to containment failure and reactor breach within 72 hours of initial symptoms. "You know what I don't understand?" Rodriguez was saying to Chen, apparently continuing a conversation Marcus had missed while talking to Kira. How someone with a kid ends up working night shift maintenance. I mean, what kind of life is that for a family? Some people just don't have better options, Chen replied with the casual cruelty of someone who'd never faced real hardship. Not everyone can handle the pressure of real engineering work. Some folks are better suited to simpler jobs. Still, Rodriguez continued, you'd think he'd try to improve his situation instead of just accepting it. How hard could it be to get some basic technical training? Marcus kept cleaning while listening to them discuss his life as if he weren't standing 3 meters away. They had no idea that he held advanced degrees in nuclear engineering and quantum physics, that he'd spent 10 years designing reactor safety systems for deep space installations, or that he'd once been considered one of the most promising young engineers in the colonial fleet. They also had no idea that the reactor system they were monitoring was showing early signs of the exact type of containment failure that had destroyed a research station in the Proxima system 5 years ago, killing everyone aboard. Marcus, Vega called again, you're moving too slowly. I want this area cleaned and clear in 30 minutes. Yes, sir, Marcus replied, though privately he was calculating how long it would take to run a complete diagnostic on the containment system if he had access to the engineering terminals. The answer was depressing. About 15 minutes longer than his entire cleaning shift. And Thompson, Vega added with obvious amusement, try not to break anything important with that mop of yours. Some of this equipment is more complex than anything you've ever seen. I'll be careful, Marcus promised, though he was looking at equipment he'd helped design and systems he understood better than anyone else on the station. Wouldn't want to accidentally improve anything. The joke fell flat, but Marcus hadn't really expected it to land. He'd learned that humor was often the only way to deflect the casual contempt that came with being seen as intellectually inferior to people who wouldn't recognize a containment field cascade if it was spelled out in flashing letters. As he worked, Marcus continued monitoring the reactor readings through his peripheral vision. The patterns were becoming more pronounced, and he was increasingly certain that the station was heading toward a serious safety crisis. The question was whether he could find a way to address it without revealing knowledge that would raise uncomfortable questions about his background. Daddy? Kira's voice came through his communicator again, this time more urgently. I heard some loud noises, and the lights flickered. Is everything okay? Marcus paused in his cleaning, realizing that what Kira was experiencing might be related to the reactor anomalies. Power fluctuations were often the first external sign of containment field instability. Everything's fine, sweetheart, he said, though he was beginning to doubt the truth of that statement. Just routine maintenance. Try to go back to sleep. Okay, Daddy. But if something scary happens, you'll come home, right? Of course, Marcus promised, though he was increasingly worried that if something scary did happen, he might not be able to get home at all. I'll always come home to you, Kira. As he ended the call, Marcus realized that his dual identity, the invisible maintenance worker and the hidden nuclear engineer, was about to collide with circumstances that might not give him the luxury of choosing which role to play. The reactor was showing signs of instability that could threaten everyone on the station, including his daughter, and he might be the only person present who understood the severity of the situation. Hey, Professor, Rodriguez called out again, you're looking pretty serious over there. Don't tell me you're actually trying to understand these reactor readings. We might have to start charging you tuition for the education. Just admiring the pretty colors, Marcus replied with forced lightness, though internally he was calculating failure probabilities and emergency response times. Very educational, all these blinking lights. That's the spirit, Chen said approvingly. Leave the thinking to the people who know what they're doing. Marcus nodded and continued his work, silently hoping that when the crisis came, and he was increasingly certain it would come, the people who knew what they were doing would be enough to handle it. Because if they weren't, he'd have to choose between maintaining his cover and saving his daughter's life. And that, he realized, wasn't really a choice at all. 3 days after first noticing the containment anomalies, Marcus found himself standing in the monthly all-hands meeting listening to Chief Engineer Vega dismiss the very concerns he'd been trying to raise through unofficial channels. The reactor readings had worsened significantly, but the engineering staff continued to classify them as minor sensor fluctuations that didn't warrant investigation. "Some of you may have heard rumors about reactor irregularities," Vega was saying to the assembled crew. "I want to assure everyone that these reports are based on misunderstanding of normal operational variations. Our systems are functioning perfectly within acceptable parameters." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in the back of the room, knowing that the rumors Vega was dismissing had started with his attempts to alert supervisors about the containment field degradation. He tried approaching 3 different engineers with his observations, only to be told that maintenance staff shouldn't worry about technical matters beyond their understanding. In fact, Vega continued with obvious amusement, "We've had some particularly creative interpretations of our monitoring data from unexpected sources. Apparently, even our cleaning staff has opinions about nuclear engineering now." Laughter rippled through the room as heads turned toward Marcus, who felt heat rise in his cheeks. He'd hoped his concerns would be taken seriously despite his job title, but instead they'd become a source of entertainment for the engineering department. "Now, I'm not criticizing initiative," Vega said, clearly enjoying himself. "It's admirable when people take interest in work beyond their qualifications. But I think we can agree that reactor safety should be left to qualified professionals who understand the complexity of these systems." More laughter, and Marcus caught several crew members nudging each other while glancing in his direction. He'd become the station's unofficial joke, the janitor who thought he understood nuclear physics. "Chief," Marcus said, standing up despite knowing it would only make things worse, "I really think someone should look at the quantum containment readings more carefully. The fluctuation patterns aren't random, they're following a progression that could indicate structural problems with the field generators." The room fell silent, then erupted in barely suppressed snickering. Vega's expression shifted from amusement to irritation at having his authority questioned by someone so far below his rank. "Mr. Thompson," Vega said with exaggerated patience, "I appreciate your enthusiasm for reactor safety. But containment field analysis requires years of specialized training and advanced degrees in nuclear engineering. These aren't concepts that can be understood through casual observation while mopping floors." "Actually," Marcus said, his frustration finally overriding his caution, "I do have advanced degrees in nuclear engineering. I spent 10 years designing reactor safety systems before." "Before you ended up cleaning bathrooms?" Vega interrupted, his tone sharpening. "Mr. Thompson, if you were really a qualified nuclear engineer, you wouldn't be working night shift maintenance. The fact that you're making mops instead of managing reactors tells us everything we need to know about your actual expertise." The room erupted in laughter again, and Marcus felt the familiar sting of having his past dismissed based on his present circumstances. Nobody wanted to hear that a janitor might know more about their systems than they did, especially when accepting that knowledge would mean acknowledging their own mistakes. "I'm just saying," Marcus tried again, "that someone should run a comprehensive diagnostic on the containment field generators. The patterns I'm seeing suggest microfractures that could cascade into major structural failure." "Patterns you're seeing," Vega repeated with obvious skepticism. "Mr. Thompson, quantum containment analysis requires sophisticated interpretation of multiple data streams. It's not something you learn by watching displays while emptying trash cans. But if you just look at the progression over the past 72 hours. "Enough," Vega said firmly. "Mr. Thompson, I'm going to be very clear with you. Your job is to clean this facility, not to second-guess the qualified engineers who actually understand how it works. If you have concerns about your cleaning duties, take them up with your maintenance supervisor. If you want to play engineer, do it on your own time." Marcus sat down heavily, realizing that any further argument would only cement his reputation as a delusional maintenance worker with delusions of grandeur. Around him, the crew continued to whisper and chuckle about the janitor who thought he understood nuclear physics. After the meeting, Marcus returned to his quarters in the lower levels to find Kira working on her homework at their small table. She looked up with a bright smile that immediately made the humiliation of the meeting seem less important. "How was work, Daddy?" she asked, the same question she posed every morning when he returned from night shift. "Eventful," Marcus said, settling into the chair beside her. "What are you working on?" "Math problems about probability," Kira said, showing him her tablet. "Teacher says we need to understand how to calculate the chances of different outcomes." Marcus looked at the simple probability equations and felt a bitter irony. He'd spent the morning calculating the probability of reactor containment failure based on current degradation rates, but nobody wanted to hear those calculations from someone who cleaned their floors. "Daddy," Kira said thoughtfully, "why don't you work as an engineer anymore? I know you know about that stuff because you helped me with my science homework." Marcus had been dreading this question, knowing it would come eventually as Kira grew older and more observant. How could he explain that sometimes life circumstances force people into situations that didn't reflect their capabilities or training? "Sometimes, sweetheart, people have to take different jobs than the ones they trained for," he said carefully. "After Mommy died, I needed work that would let me take care of you, and the maintenance job was available when we needed it. But couldn't you do both? Engineer work during the day and take care of me at night?" "It's complicated," Marcus said, though the truth was simpler and more painful. After the transport accident that killed his wife, he'd needed time to grieve and care for a traumatized 6-year-old daughter. By the time he was ready to return to engineering work, his credentials had been questioned, his references had grown stale, and positions had been filled by people without gaps in their employment history. The maintenance job had been a temporary solution that had somehow become permanent. "Are you sad that people don't know you're smart?" Kira asked with the directness that only children possessed. Marcus considered the question seriously. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But being smart isn't about what job you have or what other people think about you. It's about what you know and how you use that knowledge to help people. Do you help people with your engineering knowledge?" "When I can," Marcus said, thinking about his ongoing efforts to get someone to take the reactor situation seriously. "But sometimes people don't want help from unexpected sources." "That's silly," Kira said with 8-year-old logic. "If someone knows how to fix something, it shouldn't matter what their job is." "You're absolutely right," Marcus agreed. "But adults don't always think as clearly as kids do." That afternoon, as Marcus prepared for another night shift, he received a priority alert through his maintenance communicator. The reactor's primary cooling system had developed a leak that was being treated as a routine repair, but Marcus realized immediately that the timing was connected to the containment field problems he'd been tracking. He arrived at the reactor level to find the engineering team focused on the coolant issue while completely missing the bigger picture. The containment field fluctuations had accelerated, and the cooling system failure was a symptom, not a separate problem. "Daddy?" Kira's voice came through his communicator as he watched the engineers implement repair procedures that would actually make the containment situation worse. "I'm scared. The lights keep flickering, and there are weird noises in the walls." Marcus felt his heart rate spike as he realized that the reactor instability was beginning to affect the station's infrastructure. They were moving rapidly toward a crisis that could threaten everyone aboard, including his daughter. "Stay in our quarters, sweetheart," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "Don't go anywhere until I come home, okay?" "Okay, Daddy." "But you sound worried. Is something wrong?" Marcus watched Chief Engineer Vega direct repairs that would temporarily stabilize the cooling system while accelerating the underlying containment field degradation. In about 6 hours, when the engineering team went off duty, the reactor would be left in the hands of a skeleton crew that wouldn't recognize the signs of impending failure until it was too late. "Everything's going to be fine," he told Kira, though he was no longer certain that was true. "Daddy just has some important work to do tonight." "Important cleaning work?" Marcus looked at the reactor control systems that he'd helped design years ago, systems that were now showing every indication of approaching catastrophic failure while the qualified engineers dismissed the warnings as sensor glitches. "Something like that," he said. "I love you, little star." "I love you too, Daddy." As Marcus ended the call, he realized that his choice was becoming clearer. He could continue trying to convince people who wouldn't listen, or he could prepare to act when the crisis arrived. Because if he was right about the containment field progression, and 17 years of nuclear engineering experience told him he was, the crisis was coming whether anyone believed him or not. And when it did, he'd have about 4 minutes to save 50,000 lives, including the one that mattered most to him in the entire galaxy. The quantum containment alarm began its shrill warning at 0347 hours, catching the Skeleton Knight crew completely off guard as Marcus watched from across the reactor control room where he'd been conducting what appeared to be routine cleaning. The display panels erupted in cascading red alerts as the containment field generators began failing in exactly the sequence he'd been predicting for the past week. "What the hell is happening?" shouted Night Supervisor Park, rushing to the primary control station as warning lights bathed the room in crimson urgency. "These readings can't be right, the containment field is showing massive destabilization." Marcus dropped his cleaning equipment and moved toward the control consoles, his heart hammering as he realized they had perhaps 3 minutes before complete containment failure would release enough energy to vaporize the entire station. The automated safety systems were cycling through emergency protocols, but he could see they were implementing procedures designed for gradual shutdown, not catastrophic field collapse. "Park, we need to initiate emergency core isolation immediately," called Technician Willis from the secondary station. "But the automated sequence is estimating 47 minutes for safe shutdown completion." "We don't have 47 minutes, Marcus said, moving to an auxiliary control terminal. "The field degradation is accelerating exponentially. At current rates, we have maybe 4 minutes before containment breach." "Thompson, get away from those controls," Park ordered, his voice sharp with panic and authority. "This is an engineering emergency, not a cleaning emergency." But Marcus was already accessing the reactor systems through his maintenance credentials, his fingers flying across interfaces he hadn't touched in 3 years but still knew as intimately as his own heartbeat. The containment field required precise rebalancing of quantum flux rates, a procedure that demanded split-second timing and deep understanding of reactor physics. "The quantum resonance chambers are overheating," Willis reported, his voice rising with fear. "Field strength is down to 37% and falling. We need Chief Vega here immediately." "Vega's not answering his communicator," Park replied, frantically trying to raise the senior engineering staff. "Willis, can you implement manual containment protocols?" "I don't know the procedures," Willis admitted. "This isn't covered in standard training. We need someone with advanced reactor certification." Marcus watched the containment readings plummet toward critical levels while the night crew struggled with emergency procedures they'd only studied in theory. The quantum field generators were cascading toward failure in a pattern that would create a chain reaction impossible to stop once it reached the primary core. "Everyone needs to evacuate the reactor level immediately," he said, continuing to work at the auxiliary controls. "This containment failure is going to breach the primary shielding in approximately 3 minutes and 40 seconds. "Thompson, what are you doing?" Park demanded, moving toward Marcus's workstation. "Those are restricted controls. You don't have authorization to." "I'm implementing quantum field rebalancing protocols," Marcus interrupted, adjusting plasma flow rates with the precision of someone who'd spent years studying exactly this type of emergency. "The automated systems are trying to shut down gradually, but gradual shutdown will take too long. We need immediate field stabilization through manual intervention." "You're talking about procedures that require advanced nuclear engineering certification," Willis said, staring at Marcus with confusion and growing hope. "How do you know about quantum field rebalancing?" Marcus didn't answer, focused entirely on the delicate process of redirecting plasma flow through secondary containment channels while simultaneously recalibrating the quantum resonance frequencies. It was like performing surgery on a bomb while riding a collapsing building. Every adjustment had to be perfect, or the whole system would cascade beyond recovery. "Field strength stabilizing at 28%, he announced, sweat beading on his forehead as he worked. "Initiating emergency cooling protocols and redirecting power flow through backup systems." "How is he doing this?" Park whispered, watching Marcus manipulate controls with the confident precision of someone who understood every aspect of the reactor's operation. "Thompson, how do you know these procedures?" "I designed half of them," Marcus replied without looking up from his work, too focused on saving lives to worry about maintaining his cover any longer. Quantum containment theory was my doctoral dissertation topic, and I spent 10 years developing safety protocols for deep space reactor installations. The room fell silent except for the gradually decreasing alarm tones as Marcus continued his emergency intervention. His hands moved across the controls with practiced efficiency, implementing procedures that most of the station's engineering staff would need manuals to understand. Containment field strength increasing to 35%, Willis reported, his voice filled with amazement. "Whatever you're doing, it's working. Primary cooling restored, secondary generators online, quantum resonance frequencies stabilized," Marcus announced, finally stepping back from the controls as the warning lights shifted from red to amber. "Field integrity should continue improving over the next hour as the system rebalances." Park stared at Marcus as if seeing him for the first time. "You just prevented a complete reactor breach that would have killed everyone on this station. How is the night janitor qualified to perform emergency nuclear engineering procedures?" "Because I'm not really a janitor," Marcus said simply, exhaustion starting to replace the adrenaline that had carried him through the crisis. "I'm a nuclear engineer who's been working as a janitor because sometimes life doesn't go according to plan." The control room doors burst open as Chief Engineer Vega arrived with the senior engineering staff, their faces showing the panic of people who'd been awakened by catastrophic emergency alerts. Vega stopped short when he saw Marcus standing at the reactor controls instead of cowering in a corner like he'd expected the cleaning staff to be doing. "What's Thompson doing at the engineering station?" Vega demanded. "Park, why is maintenance personnel accessing restricted controls during an emergency?" "Because he just saved all our lives," Park replied, his voice carrying a mix of respect and bewilderment. "Vega, he implemented emergency containment procedures that I didn't even know existed. Manual quantum field rebalancing, plasma flow redirection, emergency cooling protocols, procedures that require expert-level understanding of reactor physics." Vega looked at the stabilizing reactor readings, then at Marcus, his expression cycling through confusion, disbelief, and growing understanding. "Thompson, explain to me how a night shift cleaner knows advanced nuclear engineering procedures." Dr. Marcus Thompson, MIT Nuclear Engineering, Ph.D. in Quantum Physics, 10 years senior reactor design experience with Colonial Fleet Engineering, Marcus said tiredly. Former lead designer for deep space reactor safety systems, current single father trying to provide stable employment while raising a daughter who lost her mother in a transport accident. The control room was completely silent as the implications of Marcus's revelation sank in. Chief Engineer Vega, who had spent weeks mocking the janitor's attempts to raise safety concerns, now understood that he'd been dismissing warnings from someone more qualified than anyone else on the station. "You tried to warn us," Vega said quietly. "The containment field anomalies you reported, you knew this was coming." "I knew it was possible," Marcus corrected. "The progression patterns indicated potential field destabilization, but I couldn't get anyone to take the warning seriously from someone whose job title was maintenance worker." "Because we're idiots," Willis said bluntly. "We assumed that job title determined competence instead of listening to what you were actually saying." Marcus's communicator chimed with an incoming call from Kira, and he realized that in the chaos of preventing reactor meltdown, he'd forgotten to update his daughter about the emergency. "Daddy?" Kira's worried voice filled the control room. "The alarms stopped, but I heard people running in the corridors. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart," Marcus said, his voice gentle despite his exhaustion. "There was a problem with one of the station's systems, but it's fixed now. Everything's safe." "Did you fix it with your engineering knowledge?" Kira asked with the innocent directness that always surprised adults. "Yes," Marcus said, looking around the control room at the faces of people who were seeing him clearly for the first time. "I used my engineering knowledge to help keep everyone safe. I'm proud of you, Daddy. Are you coming home soon?" Very soon, Marcus promised. I just need to make sure everything is stable, and then I'll be right there. As he ended the call, Marcus found the entire engineering staff looking at him with expressions ranging from respect to embarrassment to genuine curiosity about the man they dismissed as intellectually inferior for 3 years. Dr. Thompson, Vega said formally, his voice carrying none of the condescension that had characterized their previous interactions, I owe you an apology. We owe you our lives. And I think we need to have a very serious conversation about your role on this station. Marcus nodded, though privately he was more concerned about getting home to Kira than about career rehabilitation. He'd done what needed to be done to protect his daughter and everyone else aboard the station. The recognition was gratifying, but saving lives had been its own reward. The reactor should remain stable with standard monitoring, he said, gathering his abandoned cleaning equipment. But someone should run a complete diagnostic on the quantum field generators within the next 48 hours to identify the underlying cause of the containment degradation. Will you supervise that diagnostic? Vega asked. I think it's clear that you understand these systems better than anyone else on the station. Marcus looked around the control room where he'd spent 3 years being dismissed and ridiculed, then thought about his daughter waiting for him in their cramped quarters in the lower levels. I'll help, he said finally. But I'm not abandoning my cleaning duties or my daughter's schedule. If the station wants my engineering expertise, they'll have to work around my responsibilities as a father. Whatever terms you want, Vega said immediately. Dr. Thompson, you just proved that expertise and heroism can come from the most unexpected places. The least we can do is accommodate the person who saved our lives. 6 months after the reactor crisis that had transformed him from invisible janitor to station hero, Dr. Marcus Thompson stood in the newly constructed observation deck explaining quantum containment theory to his daughter Kira while the Titan's Edge mining station operated more safely than it had in years. The deck had been built as part of a comprehensive safety upgrade program that Marcus had designed and implemented while maintaining his hybrid role as both senior reactor consultant and part-time maintenance coordinator. So the quantum field is like a bubble that keeps all the dangerous energy contained? Kira asked, peering through the transparent aluminum viewing panel at the reactor core far below them. That's a good analogy, Marcus confirmed, activating a holographic display that showed the containment fields as shimmering spheres of light. The quantum bubble has to be perfectly balanced, like blowing soap bubbles. Too little energy and it collapses, too much and it bursts. And you can see when the bubble is getting weak? I can see the patterns that indicate stress in the containment field, Marcus explained, highlighting fluctuations in the holographic display. It's like watching someone's breathing to know if they're healthy or sick. The reactor has rhythms that tell us when something needs attention. Kira nodded seriously, then grinned with the enthusiasm of a 9-year-old who discovered that her father was genuinely important. And now everyone knows you're smart instead of just thinking you're a janitor. Well, Marcus said thoughtfully, I'm still a janitor sometimes. I work maintenance shifts 3 days a week because I enjoy the work and because the maintenance team deserves someone who understands both the technical and practical sides of keeping the station running. But don't people think it's weird that you clean toilets and design reactor safety systems? Marcus laughed, remembering similar questions from station personnel who couldn't understand why someone with his qualifications would choose to continue custodial work. Some people think it's weird, but I've learned that all honest work has dignity. Besides, the maintenance team accepted me when no one else would, so I'm not abandoning them just because my job title changed. The observation deck's communicator chimed, and Chief Engineer Vega's voice filled the space. Dr. Thompson, we're ready for the monthly safety briefing when you are. On my way, Marcus replied, then turned to Kira. Want to come listen to Daddy talk about reactor safety to a room full of engineers? Can I ask questions? Kira asked eagerly. You can ask questions, Marcus confirmed. But try not to point out when the engineers say something silly. It embarrasses them. They made their way to the main conference room, where Marcus found the station's entire engineering staff assembled along with representatives from Colonial Mining Administration who'd come to review the safety improvements that had made Titan's Edge a model for other deep space installations. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vega announced as Marcus and Kira entered, "Dr. Thompson will be presenting his analysis of this month's safety metrics and proposed upgrades to our emergency response protocols." Marcus activated the holographic presentation system, displaying safety statistics that showed dramatic improvements in all categories since the implementation of his comprehensive monitoring programs. "Overall system stability has improved by 47% over the past 6 months, he began, with 0 critical incidents and a 96% reduction in maintenance-related shutdowns. Dr. Thompson, interrupted Administrator Hayes from the Colonial Mining Board, "Your safety improvements have been remarkable, but some of our accountants are questioning the cost-effectiveness of employing someone with your qualifications in what amounts to a maintenance position." "That's an interesting perspective," Marcus replied diplomatically. "What value would you place on preventing the total destruction of a 50 billion credit mining installation and the loss of 50,000 lives?" "Obviously, the safety improvements are valuable," Hayes admitted. "But couldn't these same results be achieved by hiring additional qualified engineers rather than overpaying for someone who splits time between reactor design and janitorial duties?" Kira raised her hand with the confidence of someone who'd grown up in technical briefings. "Excuse me, Mr. Administrator, but don't you think it's good that my daddy understands both the engineering and the practical parts of running the station? He knows what problems the maintenance workers find because he actually does the work himself." The room fell silent as a 9-year-old girl articulated something that the administration had missed entirely. Marcus felt a surge of pride as he watched his daughter confidently address adults who were questioning his professional choices. "That's an excellent point, Kira," Vega said seriously. "Dr. Thompson's dual perspective has been invaluable. He understands theoretical reactor physics and practical maintenance challenges, which gives him insights that purely academic engineers might miss. Plus," added Technician Willis, who'd been part of the skeleton crew during the reactor crisis, "Dr. Thompson has established mentorship programs that help maintenance staff pursue additional education and career advancement. We've had 6 people complete engineering certification programs in the past 4 months." Marcus nodded toward Willis, remembering the young technician's panic during the emergency and his subsequent dedication to learning advanced reactor procedures. "One of the things I learned from my own career path is that circumstances can prevent people from pursuing their full potential. Creating opportunities for advancement helps ensure that we don't waste talent just because someone's current job title doesn't reflect their capabilities." Speaking of career advancement, Administrator Hayes said, consulting his data pad, "We've received requests from 3 other mining installations for Dr. Thompson to consult on their safety systems. Would you be willing to expand your role to include multi-station responsibilities?" Marcus considered the offer while thinking about Kira's school schedule and the commitments he'd made to the Titan's Edge maintenance team. "I'd be happy to provide consultation and training, but my primary responsibility is to this station and to my daughter. Any expanded role would have to accommodate those priorities. What if we could arrange for family housing at the different installations?" Hayes suggested. "Kira could have educational opportunities across multiple stations while you develop safety programs throughout the Colonial Mining Network." "That sounds like an adventure," Kira said enthusiastically. "Could I learn about different types of reactors at different stations?" Marcus realized that his daughter was growing up in an environment where her intellectual curiosity was encouraged and her father's expertise was respected, a stark contrast to the dismissive treatment they'd both experienced before the reactor crisis. "It's something we could consider," he said. "Though I'd want to ensure that any travel schedule allows Kira to maintain stable friendships and educational continuity." "Dr. Thompson," said Dr. Rodriguez from the engineering team, "I wanted to thank you again for the recommendation letter you wrote for my application to the Advanced Reactor Design Program. After working with you, I realized how much more I had to learn about nuclear engineering." Rodriguez has been accepted to the Colonial Engineering Institute, Vega announced. "She'll be the 3rd engineer from our team to pursue advanced education based on Dr. Thompson's mentorship program." Marcus felt satisfied by the knowledge that his experience had helped other people advance their careers and develop their potential. The crisis that had revealed his hidden qualifications had also created opportunities for others to grow beyond the limitations that job titles and assumptions had previously imposed. The most important thing I've learned, Marcus said, addressing the assembled group, is that competence and heroism can be found in unexpected places. Before the reactor crisis, everyone assumed that my job title determined my capabilities. Now we know that expertise can be hidden behind circumstances, and that some of the most valuable insights come from people who understand systems from multiple perspectives. What's the lesson for station management? Administrator Hayes asked. Listen to everyone, regardless of their job title, Marcus replied. Some of our most important safety improvements have come from suggestions by maintenance staff who notice things that engineers miss. Competence isn't determined by hierarchy, it's demonstrated by results. Kira raised her hand again. Daddy, tell them about the maintenance worker who figured out the cooling system improvement. Maintenance specialist Chen, formerly engineer Chen, identified a more efficient coolant flow pattern based on her experience cleaning the thermal distribution networks, Marcus explained. Her observation led to a 15% improvement in cooling efficiency because she understood how the system actually behaved in practice, not just how it was supposed to work in theory. Wait, Administrator Hayes said, looking confused. Engineer Chen is working in maintenance now. By choice, Marcus confirmed. After the reactor crisis, several people requested transfers to different departments to explore new challenges. The arbitrary barriers between engineering and maintenance have largely disappeared because we've learned that both perspectives are valuable. This is exactly the kind of organizational innovation we want to see throughout the colonial mining network, Hayes said approvingly. Dr. Thompson, I think we definitely need to discuss expanding your role to include system-wide safety and personnel development programs. As the meeting concluded, Marcus walked with Kira back toward their quarters, which had been upgraded to family housing in the station's residential section. The cramped lower-level compartment was now a comfortable home that reflected their improved circumstances without forgetting the lessons they'd learned during harder times. Daddy, Kira asked as they reached their door, are you happy that everyone knows you're smart now? Marcus considered the question while thinking about the journey from invisible janitor to respected engineer, from dismissed maintenance worker to safety consultant whose recommendations were implemented throughout the colonial mining network. I'm happy that I can help people more effectively, he said finally. But I was never ashamed of the work I was doing before. Cleaning toilets and preventing reactor meltdowns are both important jobs, they just require different types of knowledge. And now you get to do both, Kira said with satisfaction. And now I get to do both, Marcus agreed. Plus, I get to work with people who've learned not to judge others based on job titles or circumstances. That might be the most important improvement of all. That evening, as Marcus tucked Kira into bed in their comfortable new quarters, she asked the question that had become part of their nightly routine, tell me about the time you saved the station, Daddy. Once upon a time, Marcus began, settling into the chair beside her bed, there was a man whose job it was to keep things clean and safe. People thought that meant he was only good for simple work, but they didn't know that sometimes the most important knowledge comes disguised as ordinary experience. And when the time came to choose between staying invisible and saving lives, he discovered that heroism isn't about having the right job title, it's about doing what needs to be done when no one else can do it. And everyone lived happily ever after? Kira asked sleepily. Everyone lived, Marcus said simply. And sometimes, that's the happiest ending of all.